Once awakened, the boss Danzhi was stripped of all skills and thrown into the god creation plan. The previous second destroyed the sky and the earth, and the second struggle to survive. The Lord of Space told her, "You can freely create your own world and eventually become an unbound god." Danzhi. It's not impossible either. Extract different one-time buffs, shuttle through different worlds to complete tasks, build social infrastructure as weapons, and immerse yourself in the experience of the creator. Weapon House. Buy one with a discount card. Worldview of Magical Civilization. Buy one. Civilization Connector. Not buying is not enough. The witch settled in the small town, and in the city separated by a wall, the aircraft carrier was about to launch, and the elves were shuttling through the moon sea. The lifeless world had vitality and civilization, and she was responsible for dominating everything. Danzhi looked at his world with full achievements, and the system prompted new visitors. Lord of Space. Why don't you help me keep this authority for now? Chapter 1. High Wall. Chapter 1. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. What is the significance of all of this? On an ordinary day, Danzhi opened his eyes in the chaos, detected the awakening of the world's dominant NPC consciousness and began to engage in the God creation plan. The system broadcast sound that could be heard at all times sounded in her ears, but it was something that Danzhi had never heard before. Before she could figure out the meaning of this sentence, her whole body was thrown away by the rapid external force, and her facial features were squeezed together in pain. Danzhi reluctantly stood up, no longer surrounded by the familiar flower garden courtyard. She was standing on a creaking wooden boat, with the cold sea breeze and waves rushing towards her, potentially overturning the boat at any moment. It seems that rainstorm will fall at any time in the cloudy sky. Looking around, fog will rise on all sides of the sea, and only a row of gray stripes will appear on the sea far away. Danzhi was about to see more clearly when he heard a strange noise behind him and turned around vigilantly. The gray sea behind me formed a huge vortex, slightly sinking, and the middle of the vortex was rising. A small mountain. The foreign object quickly rose, and Danzhi finally saw clearly that it was a huge baleen whale. It was too big, and the mouth of the blood basin covered the entire sky. The ship was in the middle of the whale's mouth, small as an inconspicuous fruit in the center of the canyon. The baleen whale's sharp teeth were adorned with flesh and blood, biting towards the wooden boat. Danzhi instinctively raised his arms and drew a half circle, but it didn't produce any effect, and his heart was even more confused. As Danzhi Lienren and his boat were about to be swallowed up, everything came to a standstill, and the system broadcast rang again. Exploration of the world has been paused. Please explain before starting exploration. Danzhi looked at the still baleen whale in front of him, the water droplets standing beside him, even the hair blown by the wind frozen in place. He frowned and asked, "Where is this? Why is my skill ineffective? Why am I not here?" Her mind was very confused, thinking and even asking questions became confusing. Congratulations to the World Master Danzhi for awakening self-awareness and breaking away from program work. You are about to be involved in the Master's God creation plan. Please complete the exploration of the world within the constraints and earn points. Your questions will be partially answered after the exploration of the world is completed. The system paused for a moment, and in front of Danzhi appeared a huge unreal paper. World Dominator Information Table. NPC Name. Danzhi Ability. Defeat the enemy, deprived, the Blade of the Moment, deprived, 3000 shuttles, stripped, mysterious meaning. Meteorite Tracing, deprived, passive. Ihue, permanent. 15% chance to randomly trigger a vulnerability on the target. Consciousness Clone, permanent. Danzhi automatically generates a consciousness clone after entering battle, possessing all skills of the body and inheriting 60% of the body's strength damage. When the clone disappears, it causes a 10-second stun effect on surrounding hostile targets. Permanent effect deprivation, can only summon once a day in the exploration world, duration. 40 minutes, reset at 0 points. Subordinate world. Dark forest moon sea level. LV0 title. To be unlocked lucky value. 2 Danzhi attempted to ask, who has the ability to deprive me of my skills? Why is my information made into a table? Did the skill just released fail because it was deprived? Exploring the world mission release. Firstly, safely reach the post-disaster maritime cities. Secondly, identify the root causes of the mutation and survive until the promulgation of the Peace Act. Danzhi's mind was spinning with lightning. Looking at the first task alone, she thought the system wouldn't make her too comfortable. She was destined to solve this baleen whale bare-handed. The system broadcast is still ongoing. For the first time entering the exploration world and obtaining new bee protection, please select the gain/loss effect carried this time within 60 seconds. If you do not select it after the countdown ends, it will be considered abandoned. The table disappeared and was replaced with buff flashing with various colors of fluorescence. Superpower liberation, counterplot, mirror disguise, deception of artists. Danzhi didn't know what the situation would be like in the future, so he could only rule out a few that were unlikely to be useful, then quickly analyzed the second task, and finally chose the effect of convincing people with reason. Selected buff effect. Reasonably convincing. You're making a lot of sense. Language effect plus 50%. Now let's start extracting the Explore World Carry effect. Done. Alien. After selecting a faction, the obedience of targets in the same faction increases by 25%, and the hatred value of opposing factions increases by 50%, continuous flow. Enemies attacked by skills have a 12% chance of obtaining a sustained bleeding effect, which can stack up to 10 layers. The following precautions are explained. 1. After death in exploring the world, the existence of the World Master in all worlds is immediately erased. 2. If the task is not completed within the restricted conditions, or if any non-exploratory information is disclosed to the indigenous people, the world will restart immediately. The number of restarts. 1. After breaking the above conditions again, the World Master will be immediately wiped out. 3. The extracted/self-selected buff skills only take effect in the exploration world and disappear on their own after returning to the subordinate world. 4. The linkage effect generated by different skills is unpredictable. Please try carefully and distinguish between enemies and friends. 5. The World Master's own skills gradually open up in exploring the world, and the deprivation effect is lifted after returning to the subordinate world. Exploring the world is about to begin, please take precautions and avoid danger. Danzhi, good luck to you. Ah. The system broadcast stopped, the still world resumed operation, and the baleen whale approached in a straight line. Danzhi saw that its lower abdomen was all ulcerated, and its upper jaw was covered with tentacles, as if it were alive, waving its teeth and claws. The wooden boat can be seen to the bottom at a glance, with only 2 oars, a harpoon, and a fishing net. She flew over and picked up the harpoon to stab her head. Fortunately, the natural talent of baleen whales is entirely focused on their body shape, and their skin is not very sturdy. Danzhi's harpoon pulled out a long bloodstain, and the small wooden boat was pushed aside by the waves, gradually moving away from the center of the bloody mouth. The beak of the baleen whale closes in the sea, causing 1,000 layers of waves. At the same time, a thick deep red blood strip appeared above the head. Danzhi frantically rowed the small boat to one side and narrowly brushed past 2 rows of sharp teeth over a meter high. A foul wind blew from behind, and she suppressed the surging in her stomach, recalling her few remaining skills. When all active skills are deprived, the consciousness clone that can be summoned once a day becomes Danzhi's ace. She can actually drive her consciousness clone to use her skills to eliminate this baleen whale, but this dangerous world is just beginning, and God knows what she will encounter later. She doesn't plan to play this card now. The baleen whale seems to be indifferent to this little thing, failing to hit it and stirring up the wind in clouds beneath the sea. Now, let alone attacking baleen whales, Danzhi can only see the shadow of a whale. She clenched her harpoon and was highly alert, only to find a shadow rapidly drifting in the sea several hundred meters away. Another head. That is a killer whale, but its left fin has disappeared and replaced it with a long opening that almost runs through the entire body of the killer whale. The sides of the opening are covered with sharp teeth, making it difficult to distinguish whether it is the second mouth of the killer whale or if it is simply another species. Danzhi vaguely felt that the killer whale was not coming towards her, because the baleen whale under the wooden boat gave up playing slowly with her and swam towards the killer whale. Two huge creatures collided under the sea, making a dull sound. In an instant, huge waves rose from both sides and slammed fiercely towards the center of the storm, causing the water level of the seawater to drop significantly in a few kilometers around. Danzhi was almost in the middle of the battle between the two whales, and the small wooden boat was shot to pieces. She only had time to catch the harpoon before being shot into the sea. Chapter 2. High Wall Chapter 2. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Although the killer whale is slightly smaller in size, it is even more ferocious. When turning around, it also bites the baleen whale with its sharp abdominal teeth, and blood quickly spreads in the nearby seawater. Danzhi barely knew how to swim, but the two whales were huge in size and constantly stirred up big waves, so she was afraid to drown before she could escape the battlefield. As she was running for her life, a few bird calls came from above her head. She looked up and was surprised again. Crowds of seagulls hover over the sea, with a total number of thousands. They fly very low and can even see the shrewdness in their small eyes. Danzhi suddenly had an idea in her heart, and she looked up and shouted, "Hey! The baleen whale has a wound on its abdomen. It can be eaten now." A few brave seagulls kept circling, diving down to take a bite when the baleen whale flipped over, and then quickly returned to their team. The system broadcast sounds. The effect of convincing people with reason is triggered, and the triggering object is not a human. The effect is reduced to 25%. Dan stopped laughing. It doesn't matter if the effect decreases, as long as it works. She started shouting at the seagulls while swimming, "You can eat. You can eat. If you don't eat anymore, there's nothing left, you can eat." More and more seagulls are starting to dive down. The system broadcast once again notified. The continuous flow effect has been triggered, but due to indirect triggering, the effect has been reduced to 6%, and the baleen whale has obtained the bleeding effect. This was an unexpected joy. Danzhi never expected that the seagulls would still have skills when attacking together. Under his instigation, the seagulls continued to attack the baleen whale and killer whale, leaving the two whales with no time to spare. They tossed in the sea and had to constantly deal with the attacks of the seagull swarm above their heads. The system keeps broadcasting, and the layers of bleeding on the two whales quickly stack up. Danzhi worked hard to stabilize his body in the sea, and when he saw that the bleeding effect was reduced by several layers, he pulled his throat and instructed the seagull to make up for it. The red color in the seawater is getting deeper and deeper, and even the whales have changed their habits. They try to jump up and attack the seagulls through the waves, but their bulky bodies cannot chase their winged predators, and instead, their blood is flowing more and more. The whale's blood volume quickly bottomed out, and Danzhi knew that this place was not suitable for staying long. He began to swim towards the distance and luckily caught the wreckage of a wooden boat on the way to catch his breath. As the effect of convincing people with reason weakened, the seagulls gradually reduced their attack frequency. Before long, Dan only heard a long hiss. She looked back at the sound, and the baleen whale reluctantly opened its huge mouth into the sky, but stopped moving and slowly sank at an extremely slow speed. The seagulls landed on the baleen whales one after another and began to feast on them. The killer whale died a little later than the baleen whale and was unable to leave the sea. The two whales were originally meant to be both defeated and injured at most, but in the end, they were consumed and killed by bloodshed, which saved the seagull flock. Danzhi was afraid that the smell of blood would attract sharks, so he took a break and continued swimming towards the distance. Listening to new system announcements while swimming. Achieve, double kill. With points plus 2000, killing 2 mutated whales at once in a novice state should not be underestimated. Achieved, full of gull chi, lucky plus 5, points plus 100, seagull. I only wanted to eat a French fries. She had no idea how much points were accumulated, and asked how the bleeding effect was triggered by the system. The system prompted her that after reaching a certain number, the seagull's attack changed from quantitative to qualitative, which gave rise to the group attack skill. Due to the bonus of the language effect of Danzhi, it was counted as half of her. Is this the linkage effect produced by different skills? Danzhi pondered. But now it's not time to study tactics, and the gray strip she saw is still very far away. She can't swim there, just exploring the world gave her a small challenge. The first task is not yet completed, and I have to survive in the perilous sea while finding a means of transportation to the maritime city. But even worse, the smell of blood still attracts a school of sharks. Danzhi's clothes had just been dyed into blood clothes, and a few small triangles emerged on the sea surface, quickly swimming towards her. The house leaks, but it rains continuously at night. Danzhi was afraid of being attacked, so he closed his breath and occasionally dived into the water to take a few glances. Sharks are much faster than killer whales, and a few mutated sharks suddenly burst out from all directions. Danzhi quickly spun in the water and quickly and fiercely stabbed a shark in the eye. The shark retreated a few meters in pain, temporarily relieving the threat. Danzhi pointed his sharp harpoon at the other shark, and the 2 sharks behind him were temporarily intimidated and dared not act recklessly. But the other 2 were not as easy to deal with. The bloody smell of their natural enemies stimulated the ferocity of the shark. One of them rushed forward, but did not want to eat her. Just as they approached Danzhi, they flexibly turned around and gave her a fierce tail slap. A sudden burst of blood splattered out from the sea, causing Dan to snort in pain. It was only then that he realized that its entire tail had mutated, with the base of the tail connected by hard keratin, forming long and pointed tail-like bone spurs, including the second dorsal fin and abdominal fin all growing into bone spurs with barbs. Danzhi's big arm was just scratched by the vertical bone spurs at the tail, and then soaked in the seawater. At this time, the skin and flesh had turned outward, and the wound was unbearable. If she drags on like this, she will definitely die in the sea. The system suddenly spoke up, the passive skill, Ihue, has been triggered, revealing the vulnerability of the mutated shark. It was Danzhi's passive skill that took effect, and a fluorescent line appeared at the connection between the blind shark's pectoral fins and body, which was very prominent. She no longer hesitated, flipped over and swam towards the blind shark, like a charging warrior holding a harpoon and thrusting towards her pectoral fin. Fortunately, the harpoon was extremely sharp, and the shark's mutation had not yet spread to the abdomen. The pectoral fins on that side were directly shaved off. Sharks suffer from pain due to variations in their tails, which rely more on the balance of their pectoral fins. As a result, the balance is disrupted, causing them to roll further and further away from the tranquility. She had no time to see the results of the battle and desperately went downstream, squeezing the 3 sharks that were rushing towards her together. Then, she quickly turned around, forked her hands, and sliced off the fins of 1 shark. However, in this way, her remaining physical strength was completely depleted. The remaining 2 sharks became cautious and did not easily approach Danzhi. She had already lost her strength, and the harpoon in her hand was getting heavier and heavier. Just as Danzhi was thinking about summoning a consciousness clone, these 2 sharks suddenly turned together in circles, seemingly hesitating whether to eat her. "What kind of moth are you?" At a moment of despair in Danzhi's heart, something arched her back. She forced herself to look back and met the big, dark eyes of a dolphin, but its gaze looked like a human no matter how it looked. Has this dolphin also mutated? Danzhi reached out to touch its forehead, and the touch was not smooth, but a rough layer of keratin. However, the dolphin allowed her to touch its head and lifted the injured hand out of the sea with its beak. There were 3 dolphins in total, and the other 2 swam around Danzhi, jumping up and diving into the sea, constantly forcing the sharks to stay away from her. With these ups and downs, the crisis was finally resolved. It's hard to believe that the variation of dolphins is evident in their intelligence, and Danzhi suspects that the hard keratin on their heads is meant to protect their brains. Now she is sitting on the back of one of the dolphins, while the other 2 seem to have some reservations about this arrangement. The 3 dolphins jump back and forth, seemingly discussing for a long time before deciding to take turns carrying Danzhi. Danzhi, who was tossed and turned for half an hour, said, "Thank you so much. The current situation is relatively safe, and it seems that not all the biological mutations in the sea are heading towards a vicious and bloodthirsty direction. These 3 little dolphins are quite considerate, swimming steadily with Danzhi on their backs, while the other 2 occasionally throw her a few small fish that have not mutated. Danzhi initially didn't dare to eat, but when he became hungry, he didn't care anymore. Don't dodge the mouths of whales and sharks, and he didn't bleed too much and died from hunger. The small fish is very fresh, but Danzhi has no concept of taste. She shaved the thorns 3 times, divided them into 5 parts, and stuffed them into her mouth. Perhaps the tense nerves finally relaxed a bit, and after his stomach was full, he felt dizzy. Danzhi didn't even have time to try to communicate with the dolphin before falling asleep. Chapter 3. High Wall Chapter 3. You are listening at novelfull.audio. When she woke up again, the fog on the sea had already dissipated, and the sun had just risen. She was closer to the gray strip that Danzhi had seen. She touched the dolphin's head and said, "You are so smart." The praised dolphin jumped with excitement and almost threw the person off its back. Danzhi asked the system, "Can you tell me how long I slept?" Perhaps this question is irrelevant, and the system quickly replied, "A total of 9 hours and 16 minutes. It seems that it's only 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning now, and I was so unprepared that I slept all night." Danzhi, feeling a bit regretful, pounded his hammer and took advantage of the calm weather to start organizing everything from scratch. Before appearing inexplicably on the wooden boat, Danzhi was the ultimate boss of a game, residing in the depths of the lunar sea. She was the supreme existence of that world, which can be summarized as the world master by the official title of the system. Her programming job is to summon her consciousness clone to confront the challenger when she enters the territory. Only after the consciousness clone is defeated, the ontology will fully attack. Danzhi is not sure who put himself into that world, nor does he know the meaning of day after day to confront those adventurers. It seems like there is a higher level existence invisibly, placing her everywhere like an object, and speaking softly can determine her life or death. She has basic knowledge of the normal world in her mind, as well as knowledge of joys, and sorrows. But looking back, it felt like she had a layer of cling film covering her head, and everything felt very hazy. Until one day, a team of adventurers who came to challenge her complained to each other when they were about to fail. She heard a young girl's anger and said, "Really, I don't know what the point is for us to waste all afternoon here. Yeah, what's the point of all this?" Danzhi woke up, freed herself from the layer of cling film, and was thrown into this dangerous sea. For the first time, she had such a strong feeling. It turned out that the sun was beautiful rising on the sea, and yesterday she worked so hard because of her survival instinct. It turned out that pain can make people restless and uneasy. Danzhi sensed novelty in her fear and a little inexplicable excitement. It was anticipation. She began to look forward to how she would live in the future. She used to be alive, but now everything has become even more lively. For the next 2 days, there will be no wind or waves, which is a rare good weather at sea. Due to the careful protection of the 3 dolphins, some small mutated fish dare not approach here. Danzhi worked hard to wash off the blood stains on his clothes and estimated that it should be half a day before he can land. However, the closer the dolphins were to the shore, the lower their mood became. If it had been the day before, Danzhi had already been able to communicate with the dolphins through physical means. Now, the three dolphins seemed to have sadness in their eyes, and their activities were not organized anymore. They were carrying Danzhi and swimming forward honestly. As he got closer, Danzhi finally noticed that the gray strip he saw in the distance turned out to be a metal wall stretching hundreds of kilometers. Although she has never lived in a normal human city, she still knows that the seaside should be a beach, coconut trees, and tourist trails. In short, she has never heard of the concept of building walls along the coast. When the dolphin was still about a kilometer away from the city wall, she reluctantly put down Danzhi and lightly patted her back, indicating that she needed to swim over on her own. Danzhi thanked her again and swam towards the city wall, and soon climbed onto the shore. It is called shore, and the distance from the seawater to the wall is only 4 or 5 meters. Looking up, the metal wall towered into the clouds, and the setting sun hit the wall. The hard metal wall reflected warm light, giving off a cold and beautiful feeling. This wall separates the city from the sea, and there is no sound of the city's hustle and bustle. Only gentle waves occasionally roll up on the shore. But what is that thing? Not far away, a white object rushed up from the waves, and Danzhi approached and found that it was a severed limb. It is a severed human limb that has been deformed by seawater immersion. Surprisingly, a normal-length human arm extends nearly 2 meters of bone from the fracture site. The fracture at the upper arm is not neat, but upon closer inspection, it seems that the bone has grown too fast, forcefully breaking the arm. Just as Danzhi was stunned, someone coldly asked, "Who is that?" She turned around and saw a group of people coming from the corner of the city wall, dressed in uniform dark blue training uniforms, complemented by yellow reflective stripes, tightly wrapped around the chest, abdomen, and legs. The person asking her was the leader of the team. Without waiting for Danzhi to answer, the person walked forward, drew a gun and aimed it at her. With the other hand, they showed Danzhi an electronic card, which seemed to be his work permit. Wu Xing, the leader of Group 22 of the supervision team, now suspects that you are a listener. According to Article 99 of the Radiation Prevention Law, we will begin testing you. A woman stepped forward and pressed the patch onto her pulse. Danzhi's intuition told her not to resist. Then Wu Xing turned around and took a metal box, pressed his fingerprint, and pulled up a layer of metal plate, revealing the metal fence inside. At the same time, the other members of the supervision team quickly formed a circle, half of them staring at Danzhi, and the other half raising their guns at the small metal cage. Danzhi also nervously took a half step back, and the female team member who was holding her wrist had already used a gun to hold her back of the head, softly deterring, "Don't move, the program will end soon." Amidst the fierce gaze of everyone, a tender yellow beak peeked out from a gap in the metal fence. A few bird calls were not as clear as what Danzhi had heard before, but rather as if they were hissing for help. She carefully discerned, and the birds in the pitch-black box finally gathered completely next to the fence. That is a round-headed yellow sparrow, with a fine fuzz on its mouth. It looks like it was just over a month old, and its beautiful feathers have been cut off at the base of its wings. The wound has dried up and scabbed. It had its wings cut off before learning to fly. Danzhi feels uncomfortable. The bird was in the cage, with its wings cut off and making a pleading cry. These fully armed inspection team members had no emotion on their faces, as if this yellow sparrow, like the gun in their hand, was just a tool for work. Wu Xing asked Danzhi, "What did you hear?" Danzhi felt a little impatient and said, "Birds chirp, otherwise what else would I hear?" "Are you sure? Is there no strange babbling? Can you hear it? Can you tell me what this bird said? Translate it." Wu Xing choked and looked at the female team member. The latter carefully examined the instrument connecting the patch on Danzhi's body and shook his head, saying, "She didn't lie, nor did she have any signal interference from the listener. Huang Ke had already retreated into the depths of the box in disappointment, and Wu Xing slowly withdrew his gun, gesturing for the female team member to remove Danzhi's patch. Danzhi followed the supervision team for a while, and the tightly fitted metal city wall above his head opened a door. Just as she was wondering how to get up, a transparent carriage slowly slid out of the door. Wu Xing pushed her forward and said, "Since you're not a listener, don't come to the beach and wander around. The supervision team will keep an eye on you for the next week, please don't go outside the wall anymore." The transparent carriage carried Danzhi up and walked through the darkness for a few seconds. Although the metal city wall was high, it was not thick. As she passed through the wall, she seemed to hear some kind of whispering. When she listened carefully, those sounds disappeared into the rumbling tracks. The small spot at the end of the tunnel gradually expanded, with streetlights shining in. 3 or 2 supervisory team members discussed what to eat for dinner by the city wall. There were not many ordinary people nearby, and a huge sign was still hung next to the brand new road. Jianlin City. Please return from this original road. Chapter 4. High Wall. Chapter 4. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. The pleasant system announcement finally sounded. Mission completed. Safely reached the post-disaster maritime city. Before Danzhi could even raise his lips, he heard the second sentence from the system. You have unlocked your identity as a listener, and your camp has been successfully selected. Achieve thrilling lie with a deception effect of plus 10%, you easily fooled the violent mechanism of exploring the world. A staff member walked out of the city wall with Danzhi and kindly reminded her, we will continue to observe you for the next week. If there is any suspicious behavior, we will still arrest you. Come home quickly. Danzhi nodded and walked towards the city, testing the role of the listener. It seemed that this identity only worked in exploring the world, but it wasn't until she left the desolate and uninhabited area of the city walls and walked all the way to the brightly lit main road that she couldn't figure out what the listener really was. After walking for a long time, there were gradually more shopping malls and residential buildings on both sides of the road. This road is a steep downhill, stopping at the top of the slope and barely overlooking the past. In the distance, tall buildings are arranged in rows, with bright lights shining through the glass buildings, complemented by neon lights. Several rows of advertisements flashed over the sightseeing tower, and there are many spacious and huge steel buildings in various directions of the city. Only the metal dome above can be seen, which is probably a characteristic building of Jianlin City. This is a modern city with a highly technological style, and it is not yet clear where the disaster has destroyed. Halfway through, Danzhi met the supervision team again. It seems that her face has been recorded in the supervision system of Jianlin City and could be investigated at any time. Although it is still unclear what camp the listeners are, it is better to be careful in everything. Danzhi was stripped of his skills, and after waking up from a chaotic state, he also felt pain like a mortal, starting to hunger and fatigue. She originally planned to sneak into a hotel to make ends meet, but the service industry automation in Jianlin City has reached a very mature level. The housekeeping robot in the hotel lobby detected that she had stayed for more than 30 minutes but did not complete the relevant check-in procedures, and politely invited her out of the lobby. Danzhi wandered around and finally found a large supermarket, where he applied for a trial food sales position. 10 minutes later, she wore an apron around her neck and pushed a mobile car as she shuttled through the supermarket. The latest genetically modified vegetable salad meets daily vitamin and basic protein needs, and the crispy home signature sauce is your familiar choice. As the world goes downhill, she becomes the dominant figure in the world and falls into the realm of exploration to shout out. Danzhi dodged the cleaning robot and lightly kicked it. A few scattered people were attracted by her sales, tasted the salad and went to look for formal attire. Dan only introduced the product specifications to customers and inadvertently heard sales conversations next to the shelves. How long until your child is released? Who knows, last time I said there was no criminal record, and if I behave well, I can go home and live, but I have to accept supervision. Ah, I envy you so much. My family is still far away. You said last month that Lao Zhang had performed well and could have his sentence reduced. Why, the tone of the boss's mouth has changed again. I heard that the radiation source in the city has not been found yet. A while ago, there was a new mutation, and the officials were all at war. Look, these days, the supervision team seems to be conducting some surprise operations, and the investigation has become tighter. Upon hearing the familiar words, Danzhi's heart tightened and he leaned over to pretend to be interested, saying, "Yes, sister. I met several teams of supervisors on the way today, and those battles were really scary." One of the tallimans saw that she was a temporary worker and perfunctorily said, "What are you afraid of? Just a test by the listener will tell. Even though it's easy to hide people in the city now, as long as the supervision team keeps an eye on them, they will still be caught sooner or later." Another person looked at Danzhi and asked her, "What about you? Who went in at home?" Although Danzhi was confused, she also extracted key elements from the conversation just now. In this world, the listener is going to be arrested and sentenced, so her face remained unchanged and she said, "There is no one else in my family, just me." Those two people showed sympathy upon hearing the words. The supermarket's end of work time is very late. Before closing, the staff went to the counter to choose discounted expired products. Danzhi also followed the army to get some food. She planned to pay the hourly wage first before buying food, and the remaining money might be used to find a cheap hotel. Most of the cabinets in the supermarket have turned off their lights, making it Danzhi's first time strolling around the supermarket and curiously picking up various things to scrutinize. Puffed foods, seasoning sauces, protein supplements, rice flour, and grains, oils, and vegetables. The cabinet next to the vegetable refrigerated cabinet has not turned off its lights yet. 2 pieces of tender and fresh meat are cut beautifully and placed in a transparent preservation compartment. The small preservation compartment slowly rotates, as if to let customers see every perfect detail of these 2 pieces of meat. Coupled with the appropriate lighting next to it, the 2 pieces of meat in the cabinet are more like artworks and unattainable. What's not quite right is that the refrigerated cabinet for storing meat is locked. What are you looking at? See what's going on. Don't wander around in the fresh produce area if you can't afford it, stay away. The supermarket security guard urged Dan to stop, as he reached out to drive people away. As for you. A piece of meat. Danzhi glanced to the side and immediately stopped. The billboard next to the refrigerator is exquisitely made. Municipal cattle farming, next supply time. 3 weeks later. Time limited explosive price. 3,600 yuan per gram. What kind of thing? 1 gram of beef, 3,600. Or was it discounted? Danzhi took 4.5 hours of trying out a promotional salary of 280 yuan in confusion, but had not yet recovered from the shock brought by the exorbitant price of beef. The supermarket employees left in 2s and 3s. The manager who recruited her just smiled at her and said, "Little girl, come back tomorrow if you have time. You can get a 10% salary increase by working continuously for a week." The store manager's phone rang, and she hurriedly patted Danzhi's shoulder while answering the phone and walking towards the bus stop. "Hello Dad. I just finished work, what time will I pick up my mom from prison tomorrow? I'm taking a good leave." Danzhi used the remaining money to find a hotel with a good environment and sat by the window to organize his thoughts. Since entering Jianlin City, she has heard many people talking about her own prisoners along the way. It seems that every household is locked in prison. Although Danzhi has not lived in normal human society, she also knows that such extreme situations are unlikely to occur. But if every household has a listener, this explanation may work. She looked at her second task. To identify the root cause of the mutation and survive until the enactment of the Peace Act. That is to say, Danzhi must not be discovered as a listener by anyone. The sky-high priced meat under strict supervision in supermarkets, the eerie metal walls in prisons, and genetically modified vegetables that need to meet protein needs. I feel like I have reached some key points, but cannot put these clues together. This city is not right. Chapter 5. High Wall Chapter 5. You are listening at novelfull.audio. It's late at night, and the nightlife of the citizens of Jianlin City has come to an end. The city has quieted down, and there is a child in Unit 1, Building 18, Yushui Community, at Unit 601. He was the only one in the empty home, and the city lights shone in, faintly revealing a family photo of 3 on the cabinet. Looking at the man with a very stable face holding his wife, the little boy was firmly supported by his parents and happily swung on the swing. The little golden-haired boy next to him had a silly face and was aiming at the ice cream in his mother's hand. The beauty is frozen in this scene. A small figure walked through the living room, checked the doors and windows, carefully closed the bedroom door, covered himself with a quilt and opened his learning machine. Happiness came out of the learning machine again, and the child quickly turned down the volume and covered the blanket tightly. That was a short video, and my mother's angry voice was light. Yuan, how did you eat ice cream on your new clothes? His own voice immediately came out. Mom, Xian has also eaten ice cream on his new clothes. Immediately after, the family couldn't help but laugh, and little golden hair licked the ice cream dripping from his new clothes. Seeing the camera filming him, he immediately pretended to be playing with a ball, but his paws came over to prevent the photographer from catching him in his predicament. Xian and Yuan are both mother's treasures. In the learning machine, there is joy. When the child heard the last sentence that came to an abrupt end, he finally sobbed and said, Dad, Mom, Yuan. Xian misses you so much. Tears welled up in my eyes, and my home remained quiet as before. Occasionally, lights shone over, illuminating the object next to the group photo. The black and white portraits of my parents. The child suppressed its crying, with no one to soothe it. In the gap between his tired crying, there seemed to be wind outside the window. The child turned off the learning machine vigilantly, constantly encouraging himself that ghosts won't attack people under the covers, and tentatively extended his head. In the middle of the night, through a layer of curtains, something was swinging around outside. Xian wrapped himself tightly in the blanket and bravely pulled open the curtains. At the same time, the window was shattered and a damp wind blew in, accompanied by an urgent urge. What else are you looking at? Help me quickly. Fortunately, it's not a ghost outside. Ah. Oh. Xian didn't bother wiping his tears and quickly shook off the blanket. He climbed up to the desk and hugged the person's leg, and the two of them struggled to climb into the house. Surprisingly a small girl, she fell to the ground, patted her small grass pocket, and the thing hanging from her immediately disappeared. It seems like a vine. Jianlin City even needs to report the planting of green belts. How could vines grow on the 6th floor? Xian thought he was dizzy and poked his head out to look outside. It was empty. Is it his hallucination? The girl nervously looked around and didn't seem to find what she was looking for. She could only ask Xian, what time is it now? Xian lit up the learning machine and glanced at it. 12.06 What? The girl deflated and sat on the ground muttering softly, why am I so unlucky? I used up my skills before I even started today. Xian stood at the entrance of the bedroom, looking at the unwelcome guest who had broken into the house. She was dressed in a very peculiar way, with a small vest made of hay and suede. The material of the dark green pants was not visible, so it was not fabric. The pants were adorned with 2 soft loops of fur. Such high-quality fur is rare here. The little girl wore elbow-length open-fingered gloves on both hands, and tied a finely woven grass basket around her waist, much like a small model showcasing new fashion in a magazine. Who are you? Are you that? Two people speak at the same time. The little girl walked around Xian Xian and seemed to realize his troubles. She took the initiative to break the ice and said, "My name is Dolly, and I'm from outside the city. By the way, are you a listener? Danzhi's the 4th day in Zhanlin." She took advantage of the convenience of customers from all directions in the supermarket and learned that there was no Peace Act in the world yet. She had to find an opportunity to contact the municipal department of Zhanlin City in order to have the opportunity to complete the task. The supermarket sells new meat every day, but just like a bank deposits cash, the protection for meat entering the fresh-keeping warehouse is also extremely tight. During this period, a noblewoman dressed in jewels spent nearly 20,000 yuan to buy a whole goose leg. The supermarket manager gave a whole set of seasoning and the latest automatic stir-fry pot along with the leg, and even called for security to escort the noblewoman to leave in a high-profile manner amidst the envy of everyone. Compared to pork and beef, poultry meat is slightly cheaper. Although no one can deny the preciousness of fresh meat, it seems like common sense, so she dare not easily ask for the reason. Probably after experiencing the buying frenzy the weekend before, there were not many customers in the supermarket today. Danzhi left work early and planned to take a car to the municipal center to search for task clues. "I need to take bus number 12 at the municipal center, pass through 9 stops, and get off at the South Gate station in the city center." Danzhi looked up at the bus stop sign, and the 97 bus passed by behind him, broadcasting, "Please hold on to the bus, bus number 97 is heading to Zhanlin 11th prison." Danzhi suddenly understood why the entire bus stop information table looked so similar, as each bus stop had many prison names. Bus Route 1 has a total of 27 stops, passing through 6 prisons. The starting and ending stations of the number 97 bus are both prisons. Bus number 225, passing through 12 prisons. The Steel City still hides everything silently. On the first day of arriving in Zhanlin City, Danzhi saw many identical metal dome buildings, which turned out to be not city-specific buildings, but prisons. This small city with a population of only over 3 million has a total of 146 prisons. No matter which world it is placed in, it is a terrifying quantity. As far as Danzhi knows, listeners will be arrested and sent to prison to serve their sentences. She determines that ordinary people and listeners will not be placed in the same prison. So, if it weren't for cities with extremely high crime rates, most of these prisons would be used to detain listeners, apart from a small number of ordinary people who commit crimes. What exactly happened in this city, making nearly half of the people become listeners? The station ahead is the first prison in the center. Passengers arriving at the station, please prepare to get off. The next station is the municipal center. The bus had just started when a deafening explosion could be heard not far away. Pedestrians on the street panicked and fled. At the same time, a piercing alarm sounded on the bus. Emergency evacuation. Emergency evacuation. The loudspeaker in the nearby park began to loudly announce, "A high-risk listener has escaped from prison. Citizens are advised not to stay on the street and quickly search for nearby shelters. A high-risk listener has escaped from prison." The unmanned bus slammed on the brakes and opened its doors, causing passengers to rush into the nearest shop. Danzhi doesn't want to enter the building for refuge, on the contrary, this is a good opportunity for her to investigate. Next to the stop sign is a small alley, and as you enter, you can directly see the situation near the first prison. A large number of inspectors are stationed nearby, and 2 armed helicopters fly from far and near over the city. Soon, an even more intense explosion sound comes, causing the ground to shake violently. Danzhi rushed into the alley and heard a cry for help amidst the chaotic sounds. "It hurts so much, what should I do? I'm dying. I finally found the pine nut." Chapter 6. High Wall. Chapter 6. You are listening at novelfull.audio. A squirrel was scratched on its hind leg and was licking its own wound. It seemed to be still talking. "Boss and boss are both hungry. Will we mutate later? It's all over. Are there any allies nearby? The squirrel licked the wound a few times, then hurriedly picked up the bag of expired nuts on the ground and stuffed them into its cheeks. Danzhi was stunned and stood still. Suddenly, a squirrel appeared in the Steel City, and she could still understand its call. She suddenly realized that since arriving in Jianlin City, there have been no animals in the entire city at any time or place. There is no household keeping pets here, no information about any breeding farms, and there are no traces of earthworms or insects in the neat flower beds. When I go to work in the morning, there have never been any birds in the city sky. Day after day, the Steel City spent many years in a lifeless state, slowly forming a strange harmony. The disaster in this city, as well as the humans who became listeners, may be related to animals. The system announcement that had not appeared for a long time sounded in your mind. Congratulations, you have discovered the key clue. A well-known secret. Please find the clue character, Zhou Zhao, and understand the process of the disaster in Jianlin City. But the situation didn't allow her to think too much. A huge steel plate fell from the vibration upstairs, and she saw that it was about to turn the squirrel into flesh and mud. Danzhi quickly raised his hand and waved it towards the void. Summoned consciousness clone, countdown to disappearance. 39 minutes and 59 seconds. A semi-transparent Danzhi appeared, looking up at the huge steel plate, expressionless as she closed her hands and drew a semicircle. A shiny silver brush flew into the air. The blade of an instant. The steel plate turned into powder without even touching the silver, and the danger was lifted. The consciousness clone quietly stopped behind Danzhi, waiting for the next command. The squirrel had climbed onto Danzhi's shoulder and shouted in her ear, "Are you a listener? I don't care, you saved me. Anyway, you're definitely not those bad people. Run, if I stay any longer, I'll mutate. Keep it down, you're very noisy. Good person, let's go quickly. My eldest and second son have been hungry for 3 days." Danzhi nodded at the squirrel on his shoulder, suddenly thinking and looking up. A girl wearing a light green gauze skirt flew in mid-air, smiling at herself. Her figure was blurry, as if covered by a misty filter, but the system information bar above her head was exceptionally clear. World Dominator. Bell Healing Camp. Listener's Task. Hide Status. Invisible Danzhi was stunned again without much insight, as it was the first time she had encountered a similar person while exploring the world. It is obvious that this Bell, like myself, is the chosen boss for the God creation plan. Bell clearly saw Danzhi's information bar as well. She raised her wand with emerald inlaid in her hand and gently waved it, adding a layer of green semi-transparent shield to Danzhi's body. The World Master Bell has released an energy shield for you, with a shield integrity of 100%. The Bell smiled without any intention of communication, and she waved her hand and flew away. Danzhi planned to put the squirrel in a safe place first. Unfortunately, as soon as he walked out of the alley, he met an inspection team member head-on. Before she could say anything, the other party drew their gun and shouted, "Mutant squirrel, listeners. Stay alert." The monitoring team fired without hesitation, and Danzhi had no other choice but to have her consciousness clone stand behind. She turned her head and ran away. She had intended to take advantage of the chaos to find some useful means of transportation to go to the municipal center, but martial law was surrounding and she couldn't get out at all. The monitoring team members were unable to see their conscious avatars and engaged in a struggle with the unknown energy emitted from the void, which actually increased the number of monitoring teams on this side. Due to nervousness and running, Danzhi's forehead was sweating profusely. In such a bright weather, he even felt a hint of coldness. The squirrel sensed her unease and crossed its big tail to wipe her sweat. The fluffy warmth made Danzhi feel a little more at ease. Countless missiles flew over the head and around the body, and the energy shield dissipated rapidly. In no time, it was damaged, and even during the escape, I heard the squirrel chattering incessantly. Don't do it, you run to the outskirts of the city. My house is not here. When is it? I still want to go home. Just save my life first and thank goodness. But you're in the city center again. Danzhi didn't hear the second half of the squirrel's sentence clearly. She heard a crisp sound, as if something had cracked open, and then was suddenly blown out by a strong wind from somewhere. The arm that had been cut open by the shark bone spur had not fully recovered, and broken glass splashed into the wound again. Danzhi didn't even have time to check the extent of the injury, so he endured the intense pain and dodged to the side. Just now, the energy shield had shattered and she could no longer be exposed under the muzzle. Perhaps the damage caused by high-risk listeners was too great, and many other listeners escaped along the way. The inspection team was everywhere, chasing them everywhere. Danzhi looked and saw that the consciousness clone was about to disappear in 2 minutes. There were not many pursuers here, and the only way out now was to take advantage of the dizziness effect caused by the disappearance of the consciousness clone and escape. The energy shield provided by the bell is of great use, as bullets that cannot be blocked with skills in time will collide with the shield, otherwise the consciousness clone will only disappear earlier. Danzhi took out a mask strap from the damaged vending machine and found the outdoor platform on the second floor of the mall. She kicked over a large coffee table and stood on the platform shouting, "I'm a listener, come and catch me." Fortunately, the armed helicopter was no longer nearby, and Danzhi no longer had to face the enemy in the sky. He shouted to the large number of monitoring teams that quickly gathered together, "I have a bomb on me. Whoever dares to shoot, everyone should not live anymore." The system broadcasts in a timely manner. The language deception effect plus 10% has taken effect. The squirrel scratched her anxiously and said, "You're crazy, let me go home. Let me go home. Don't move, lie to them. Go back alive and buy you 10 bags of pine nuts." That's what you said. The monitoring team froze completely, with countless guns aimed at Danzhi, hesitant to move. The consciousness clone is about to dissipate, and the range of dizziness caused by dissipation is 30 meters. Countdown. 10, 9, 8, Danzhi let her consciousness clone rise into mid-air, looking at the escape route map of the mall, thinking about how to escape into a safe area within 10 seconds. As the countdown to the system approached, she sweat a rare amount on her forehead. Bang! The consciousness avatar dissipated and turned into countless beautiful silver lights landing on the ground. The vigilant inspection team collapsed in a crash, and Danzhi ran away. These 10 seconds are so brief, but for those who are already prepared, they are already enough. There are many people seeking refuge on the first floor of the shopping mall. Danzhi rushed to the first floor, took off his mask, pulled on a hoodie at the women's clothing store, and lay down with the dizzying person pretending to be dead. She finally calmed down her rapid breathing, and the inspection team and citizens had woken up from dizziness. The loudspeaker outside was shouting loudly, "Refugee citizens in Jinghua Mall, please don't leave. We need to investigate the listeners." The operation efficiency of the monitoring team is extremely high. Danzhi saw many paratroopers jumping from the sky outside, so he should have gone to the rooftop to block himself. She looked around at the citizens and imitated their expressions of confusion and fear. The lobby of the first-floor shopping mall is the first round of investigation point. The monitoring team members dressed in deep blue, holding familiar iron cages, can only see clearly that this time it is not a bird with broken wings, but a small blue snake. At the moment the cage was opened, Danzhi heard heart-wrenching cries. "It hurts so much, let me die. Who can hear me speak, help me, release me, let me die." Something was deeply trapped in the skin and flesh of the little snake, leaving diamond-shaped wounds with blood. Danzhi's heart tightened again. They were afraid of the snake's mutation, so they tied the entire snake body tightly with fishing lines. As long as the little snake struggled, it could be easily killed without the intervention of the monitoring team. Chapter 7. High Wall Chapter 7. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. The testing proceeded in an orderly manner, and the entire hall was tightly surrounded. Citizens lined up one by one to receive the test. A monitoring team member scanned the entire scene, his eyes paused on Danzhi, and he slowly walked towards this side. Danzhi secretly exclaimed in her heart that it was Captain Wuxing whom she had met when she entered the city. Wuxing walked over and took off his helmet, saying, "It's not past the surveillance period yet, and you're not stopping. Why are you there again?" He didn't wait for Danzhi to answer and called for someone to bring a cage over, obviously wanting Danzhi to do the test first. Familiar female team members, familiar patches. The difference is that Danzhi has become a genuine listener and cannot hide anything from the world anymore. The squirrel didn't know where it had gone, and Dan didn't want to give it a warning signal, but the noisy little animal didn't respond. What should we do? Using that snake. Danzhi quickly rejected the idea and saw the cage open in front of her. A scream erupted from the crowd. "Ah, there are animals here." The monitoring team member ran over. The gun was fast and accurate, hitting a small black spot attempting to escape and killing with one shot. Danzhi looked over as if he had been struck by lightning. The squirrel was pierced by a bullet, and the fur around the bullet hole was burnt. One of its small claws was melted away by the high temperature of the bullet. Its fluffy tail was broken somewhere, leaving only its broken body, gradually stiffening on the floor. On the brink of death, it murmured its last sentence. "Boss, I haven't mutated, I'm a good squirrel." A few pine nuts fell from the squirrel's mouth. At that moment, Danzhi felt as if someone had hit her chest. She stood up and clenched her fists tightly, feeling the urge to hit someone for the first time. Why? Why kill without reason? At this moment, a man standing next to him carrying a briefcase approached in surprise and patted Danzhi's shoulder, saying, "Zhou Jin. Why didn't you tell uncle when you came to Zhanlin?" Wuxing turned his head and his attention returned to this side. The briefcase man cut off Danzhi's gaze from the monitoring team, which made her more conscious. This is a man that Danzhi has never seen before, but it is not a problem. The system announced his identity. "We have found a clue to the person, Zhou Zhao, please understand the well-known secret. Task. By the way, she's here to do the task. If she can't succeed this time, she'll have to start over, which means she'll have to watch this cruel thing happen time and time again." Danzhi took a sniff and continued following his words, "Uncle. I was planning to contact you tomorrow." Zhou Zhao followed suit and said, "This child misses your parents again." He seemed to be very good at dealing with such social situations and turned to explain to Wuxing, "Hello, I am the head of the proposal department of our municipal center. I do tests every day when I enter the municipal building. I am still in a meeting today, and I have already wasted a lot of time. Do you think it's possible to?" he said, showing his work permit. Wuxing remained uneasy and asked Danzhi, "Do you know him? What is his name?" "Zhou Zhao, the one who announces." The briefcase man didn't give the monitoring team too much reaction time, so he smiled at Wuxing and said, "This child, his parents were 6 years ago, so he's not in good spirits." This was a coincidence that explained the reason why Dan stopped at the beach. Before he could finish speaking, he gestured to Wuxing, who immediately understood that there was something wrong with his mind. No wonder he ran to the beach alone. "Okay, then it seems like there was a misunderstanding last time. She didn't cause any trouble for our supervision team, did she?" Danzhi felt a suffocating pain in her heart, and her nose was sore. This feeling was novel to her, but not pleasant. She restrained herself from looking at the dead squirrel, but a small pool of blood had spread under the corpse, which was particularly eye-catching. "Zhou Zhao over there has already negotiated with the supervision team and grabbed Danzhi's arm to thank Wuxing, then I will take this child with me. Thank you for cooperating with the proposal department." The two of them successfully left the mall and continued to break out of the encirclement. Zhou Zhao finally let go of Danzhi and frowned. Little girl, don't be so impulsive in the future, otherwise how many people will die? Also, why do you know my name? Danzhi had completely calmed down and asked him in return, why are you covering me? Actually, you are a listener. Zhou Zhao's eyes became fierce, and due to the large number of people on the street, he didn't make any other movements. I advise you to speak carefully, otherwise you won't even know how you died one day. It turns out that listeners are so useless. They can watch spiritual beings die in front of them without being moved, cowering among ordinary people, and even pandering to those who indiscriminately kill animals. Zhou Zhao looked around cautiously and said, you don't need to use provocative tactics. It's useless to me. I don't care what you want to do, just take care of yourself. He turned around and walked away, but Danzhi couldn't easily make anyone leave. He followed closely and said, I'm not leaving, it's you I'm looking for. Zhou Zhao remained silent and looked at her like air, walking towards the municipal building on his own. However, Dan kept following closely and chattered incessantly from behind, I know you are also a listener. Otherwise, how could you explain that you saved me, a stranger? The squirrel just now was my companion, and you heard it too. It didn't mutate at all. It just wanted to take the squirrel back to feed the child. What's it to me again? It's already dead. It was to cover my death, and you must have taken a lot of risks to cover me. I don't believe you have nothing else to do. Then you're really seeing the wrong person. I just don't want any more compatriots to die in front of me. You don't have anything worth plotting. Danzhi didn't give up and kept chasing him. As she saw that she was about to reach the entrance control of the municipal building, she didn't care about being gentle and tried to dissuade her urgently. Okay, that was my plan. Do you really think Zhanlin City is harmonious now? I want it to change. How many pets have been inexplicably killed? The families in the city are now divided, and how many are intact? Do you want to open your eyes and see how many unrelated listeners still survive? This city is about to die. Zhou Zhao suddenly stood still. The effect of convincing people with reason is triggered, and the persuasion effect is increased by 50%. The effect of convincing people with reason is triggered, and the persuasion effect is increased by 50%. After talking incessantly for a long time, the system broadcasted 2 consecutive reminders triggered by the gain effect. Danzhi didn't know which sentence moved Zhou Zhao, but in short, she succeeded. The man raised his wrist to look at the watch, then looked at Danzhi, and sighed helplessly. You go to the leisure cafe over there and wait for me. Today's meeting is very important and I must attend. At 6 o'clock, after work, I will come to see you. The two of them set a time and went their separate ways. The municipal center is not far from the prison where the accident occurred. Dan Jichao walked over and saw the miserable situation of the third prison in the city. The metal dome was smashed, the thick metal was torn upwards, and it seemed that some fierce beast had broken through the cage. Danzhi is speechless. Chapter 8. High Wall Chapter 8. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. A leisure cafe is a quiet place amidst the hustle and bustle, with independent small private rooms facing the street. Danzhi ordered a cup of coffee and tasted the unfamiliar taste, which was not bad. After some twists and turns, it was already past 4 p.m. She had experienced too much today, and a massive amount of clues were tangled in her mind, waiting to be sorted out. Firstly, the listener's ability is to communicate with animals. If it is related to the idea that animals can mutate, it indirectly means that the listener can drive mutated animals, which can also explain the absence of animals in Zhanlin City. But if the listener can manage the mutated animals well, this hidden danger can disappear, but there are still many listeners arrested, with only 2 explanations. First, listeners rely on unusual abilities to harm ordinary people, so they are arrested. Secondly, the listener experiences some uncontrollable changes that harm humans, leading to their arrest. Secondly, there is a presence among listeners, known as the high-risk level. As the name suggests, the chaos created by high-risk level listeners is likely to destroy civilized society. Once again, based on the clues collected in the past few days and Zhou Zhao's reaction, the Peace Act mentioned in the task has not yet been born. The Danzhi doubt system led her to find Zhou Zhao because even this proposal needs to be pushed forward by herself, which is considered part of the task. From the tense relationship between listeners and ordinary people, even if the Peace Act is put on the agenda, it must convince the citizens of Zhanlin City. So before that, what Danzhi needs to do is patiently wait for Zhou Zhao to tell her the cause of the disaster. Finally, there were other world masters placed in Zhanlin City. As far as the bells she saw were concerned, the two of them belonged to the same camp and did not need to be distracted for the time being. On this day, I used my passive skills to save my life, but I gained a lot of useful information, and Danzhi didn't take a risk in vain. She took a sip of half-cold coffee and lay exhausted on the table. Don't buy this, I've tried it before, it's not delicious. Why is this blueberry white? The small private rooms in the coffee shop have no doors, only half of the curtains are hung, and from this angle, Danzhi can just see the bustling hall. Two little kids are standing on tiptoe in front of the dessert freezer, quietly discussing. Danzhi froze all over and suddenly stood up. She saw an information bar above the older little girl's head. World Dominator. Dolly Camp. Ordinary People Task. Height Status. Normal. Is she an ordinary person? Why not a listener? No, Danzhi found herself trapped in a mental blind spot. The World Masters may have different missions to participate in the God Creation Project. Therefore, she herself, the Belle she encountered during the day, the Dolly she sees now, and the other worlds she has not yet seen, may have received different missions. The boy next to Dolly is no different. He is an ordinary citizen of Zhanlin City, and he doesn't look like he is being coerced. Danzhi hesitated for a moment before leaving the private room and patting Dolly's shoulder. The girl froze for a moment before slowly turning around. The system broadcast simultaneously sounded in both people's minds. New linkage skills are available. Dory's head popped out from behind Xian and said, "Sister, do you know each other?" At 6:18 p.m., the door of the coffee shop was pushed open, and Zhou Zhao, who was carrying a briefcase, stood in the shop on time. As soon as he entered, he saw Danzhi at the counter and remembered that he didn't even know her name. He exclaimed, "Hey!" Eight eyes met, and the atmosphere became momentarily stagnant. 10 minutes later, in the private room of the Leisure CAFA, 2 adults and 2 children sat on each side, staring big and small. Zhou Zhao brought up a plate of desserts and sandwiches and sighed, "Let's eat. I'll pay the bill. Let's talk about business when we're full." The two world masters have exchanged simple information to ensure that each other has no hostility and jointly conceal their identities. Don't skip a sandwich that someone else pays for dinner. Her statement to Zhou Zhao was that she came to Zhanlin City after the disaster, and she could feel that the city was declining. She hoped that Zhou Zhao could reveal everything that had happened so that she knew where to start. About 10 years ago, I only graduated from college a year ago and was interning at the municipal department of a small county near Zhanlin. At that time, there was a small fishing village below the county town, and there were dozens of poisoning accidents that year. In addition, there were rumors of radiation sources in the market, so our leaders sent me to investigate. Back then, Zhou Zhao was still an intern, and the leader who sent him to investigate clearly did not expect this young man to discover anything. I don't know if it's an illusion, but as soon as Zhou Zhao arrived at the beach, he felt that the color of the seawater was much darker than before, as if someone had discharged their own septic tank into the seawater. Many pale dead fish were floating on the shore, densely packed together, emitting a foul odor. Zhou Zhao quickly took out his camera to take photos for evidence, and when he pressed the shutter, he saw something huge in the water. He was shocked in his heart, but he bravely walked to the shore and finally saw that it was a big fish of unknown species. The fish was 7 or 8 meters long, and had hard black hair on its head, like a small brush, as if huge false eyelashes were inserted into the fish's head. The most terrifying thing was that the fish remained motionless and looked at him calmly. Zhou Zhao was so scared that he sat down on the ground, only to feel that the beach was not as clean and soft as before, and his hands were even slightly sticky when propped on it. When he looked into the sea again, the big fish was nowhere to be found. The intern, who was like a frightened bird, dared not explore again, but felt that if the investigation did not yield results, he would be scolded by the leader. So he found a fisherman's house and spent 300 yuan for dinner and overnight accommodation, planning to go to the beach the next day to see. At the dinner table, the fisherman's house whispered and asked Zhou Zhao about the intention of his trip. He was afraid of leaking important information and used the excuse that the city might plan a seaside amusement park nearby. He came to see how the environment was. After dinner, the youngest son of the fisherman's family went out to feed the chickens. It was still early in the morning, and Zhou Zhao stood in the yard chatting. While his youngest son was feeding the chickens, he muttered, "Don't bargain with me. It's too much to have 6 eggs in a day. And you, too. After eating such a big fish, I'll have 2 chickens tomorrow morning." The old hen in the shed was giggling, as if protesting. Zhou Zhao only regarded it as a rural leisure and didn't take it to heart, but his younger son's next sentence made him shiver with fear. "How can we eat the guests? The guests are leaving tomorrow morning." At this moment, the hostess walked out with a bucket of swill and lightly slapped the child, saying, "Mind your mouth." The child sneered at Zhou Zhao twice and walked into the room. For some reason, Zhou Zhao didn't feel that the child was joking and stayed up all night. The next day, just after 5 o'clock, he got up and went home early. Otherwise, he would be the first to suffer from a nervous breakdown. He greeted the male owner who had risen early and set sail, packed his things, and planned to leave. As he passed by the chicken coop, Zhou Zhao paused for a moment and, by a stroke of luck, slipped in to count the eggs. 2, 4, 6. There are 3 hens in the shed. Yesterday, the little owner asked each of them to lay 2 eggs, so they really laid 6 eggs. Chapter 9. High Wall Chapter 9. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Zhou Zhao fled like a fisherman and returned to the beach, but all the dead fish that were still crowded on the shore yesterday disappeared. The coastline was clean, and everything yesterday seemed like his illusion. No, it's not an illusion. Zhou Zhao caught a strange smell in the salty sea breeze and followed it. He found a drainage outlet, from which rolling black mud flowed out and discharged into the sea. The location of the drainage outlet is very hidden, and if it weren't for deliberate searching, normal people wouldn't have walked here. In addition, the summer is hot and there are many mosquitoes, and in winter, everything withers and becomes very barren, so no one comes. Zhou Zhao took photos of the number and panoramic view of the drainage outlet, and also organized written materials on visiting fishermen, returning to the county town for submission. The materials that could be submitted sank into the sea, and when he asked again, the leader only said there was no need to check. I worked in the Water Conservancy Department of Hualien County for 2 years and was transferred to work in Jianlin City. During these 2 years, there have been more and more news about poisoning in the city, and some tabloids have featured listeners' information. However, no one believed it at that time, and everyone thought it was a small internet celebrity trying to curry favor with the public. When Zhou Zhao went to work in the city, he happened to miss the seafood sale season. His colleague told him that due to frequent poisoning incidents, there may be a complete ban on fishing in the future, and the seafood cannot be sold, so prices have been decreasing. He vaguely felt that this matter was related to the drainage outlet he found, and took advantage of his position to find information about the drainage pipeline. The material of this water pipe has slight radiation and toxin resistance properties, and there is only one factory available for sale in the city. Zhou Zhao asked someone about the sales channel and stumbled all the way, only to find a laboratory in the city center. He remembered the rumor of the radiation source again. That thing is not easy to transfer. A wealthy businessman invested in a laboratory and built an isolation point, with the condition of research. I don't know if it's this laboratory. But this news is a folk rumor, no one has ever seen any radiation sources, and the local residents of Jianlin who have lived there for many years have never experienced strange diseases of unknown reasons. Zhou Xiao felt that laboratory sewage and food poisoning were closely related, but at that time he was just a small clerk and wanted to investigate many things, but he made no name for himself, so this matter was interrupted. And then it was that day. Which day? The other three of them asked together, and Zhou Xiao's face looked a bit ugly. He clenched his mug tightly. Zhou Xiao has been working in Jianlin City for about a year and has planned to settle down here. He usually spends the night at his fiancée A's house on weekends. On a slightly tipsy night after a romantic relationship ended, he woke up inexplicably from a deep sleep and whispered in his ear, with voices ranging from far to near, as if someone was standing outside his window chatting and someone was talking to themselves in the bathroom. He suddenly sat up, with his fiancée A.E. sleeping soundly beside him, without the habit of talking in his sleep, but the sound of small conversations still kept coming in. Zhou Xiao followed the sound and opened the curtains. It was only 4 o'clock in the morning, and there was silence outside. His family is okay, he usually goes to work and won't disturb us feeding the children. I also think it's good. When the child learns to fly, it's easy to dive. This is the 16th floor. Who is talking outside his window? Who? Oh my. Why doesn't this person sleep at night? 2 sparrows flapped their wings and flew away. Zhou Xiao realized later that they had just been chatting. He thought he hadn't woken up yet and walked to the bathroom in confusion, only to hear a different sound halfway through. Hee, love dad, love mom, pork ribs on the ground, on the ground. He was startled and looked at the white little dog sleeping in the living room. It was Bomai, who had been raised by his fiancée A.E. for 3 years. At this moment, he didn't know what kind of dream he was having. He whimpered softly, and saliva flowed down one side to the ground. Zhou Xiao stood still, slapped himself first to make sure he was awake, and then shook his fiancée A.E. to prove with his dog that he could really hear animals talking. The two of them couldn't sleep anymore, so they drove to the city hospital to report an emergency. The city of Jianlin that day was particularly strange, with an unsettling atmosphere everywhere. When Zhou Xiao arrived at the hospital, everyone was dumbfounded. The hospital was overcrowded, and 7 people who came to see him claimed to be able to hear animals talking. Recently, the activity of geomagnetic storms has been intense, and expert investigations have shown that it may affect radiation energy. Citizens are advised to work indoors as much as possible. This morning, there were multiple cases of unexplained cross-species communication in our city, and many citizens expressed that they could suddenly understand animals' speech and communicate without barriers. Whether this situation is related to the expanding radiation of geomagnetic storms is currently being investigated and verified by relevant departments. Over the night, hundreds or even thousands of listeners were born in Jianlin City. The emergency team grew longer and longer, and after calming down, Zhou Xiao felt a sense of retreat. He always felt that the relevant departments would not let mutated people leave easily. After all, in science fiction movies, those with this ability would be caught and sliced. A person pulled him into an office. Auntie. Zhou Xiao widened his eyes and said, "Why were you transferred to the emergency department?" The tired woman came straight to the point and said, "Did you also come to the emergency department because you could hear animals talking?" "Who else knows?" "Ah. Only Hui Hui knows, she came with me." "That's okay. According to my aunt, I'll be driving home right now, pretending nothing happened." At around 2 o'clock today, a batch of critically ill patients were sent, and 3 of them had already died from excessive blood loss. The wounds were particularly large, like being scratched by a wild animal's paw, but I can't analyze what animal it was. Zhou Zhao saw a stretcher being carried away from the crack in the door, with a blood and flesh blurred person lying on it. His legs were nowhere to be found, and the cut surface at the fracture was very regular, as if it had been bitten off by some bloody bite. But Auntie, what does this have to do with our illness? The mutated individuals are not only humans, but also animals. We have internal sources saying that someone saw the mutated individuals carrying mutated animals for robbery. Our hospital has already taken samples of the injured and sent them to the laboratory, and the entire city may be under lockdown. This is not something that the hospital can manage. Try to hide yourself as much as possible and not let more people know about your mutation. This is exactly what Zhou Zhao guessed. He finally understood his aunt's meaning. If mutated citizens and mutated animals were together, the consequences would be even more unimaginable. Just like when someone suddenly has a gun in their hand and has the right to control the fate of others, few people remain unmoved. They are already a high-risk group for ordinary people. Take this, if your company has a sampling test, drink a bottle before the test, don't be stunned, go home quickly. Auntie stuffed several disposable glass-sealed bottles into his hand, which contained transparent liquid. Zhou Zhao guessed that this thing could affect the sampling results. He was just pushed out of the consultation room by his aunt when screams came from the emergency room on the other side. A two-story mutated palace guard's giant tail swept across, breaking all the tempered glass in the emergency hall. Fragments flew everywhere, and many unsuspecting people were pierced by the glass, immediately falling to the ground and howling. The fountain between the inpatient department and the outpatient building has been razed to the ground. The guardian palace should be the little pet of some doctor, but there is another person manipulating it now. The mutated guardian palace suddenly stopped, tilted its head towards the inpatient department, and then seemed to have received instructions to climb towards the top of the building. The wall was peeled off by huge claws, and many patients were injured. Zhou Zhao had already grabbed his fiancée AE and fled to the parking lot. Turning back, he saw the hospital's red cross torn apart by the giant claws. In the faint morning light, the mutated palace guard, whose body was becoming increasingly swollen, roared into the sky. This scene is too magical. Chapter 10. High Wall Chapter 10. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Everything happened too suddenly. At 6 o'clock in the morning, the city alarm sounded, and by this time, the streets were in chaos, with animals that hurt people and unscrupulous elements taking advantage of the fire. A chicken with a few meters long pointed beak is pecking at a corpse, and its body cannot even withstand such a heavy mutation, with its neck about to break. The birds flying outside the window became extremely aggressive, with mutated wings brushing over frightened pedestrians, splattering blood 3 feet. More people do not believe that their pets will harm others, but the cat in their arms erupted and bit through the owner's throat. In the chaos, there were also a few mutated citizens who realized their abilities and drank away animals attempting to harm people, but their kind actions were treated as monsters by friends and family and kicked out of their homes. Overnight, the world was in chaos. The notice from the government came quickly, and all personnel from idle departments were transferred to the front line, including Zhou Zhao. He learned in the work group that the sampling swabs of mutated citizens would have obvious chemical reactions, so he secretly drank the medication given to him by his aunt before the test and successfully passed the test. Experts say that this mutation is not species-specific, but rather an individual mutation, which means that whether it is an animal or a human, the mutation is only a matter of probability. Some people may be ordinary humans for a lifetime, and animals are the same. But when cleaning up mutated animals, the authorities found that the mutation point was not as simple as communicating with animals. During the process of cleaning up the suburbs, a small team encountered reptiles with human heads. When he crawls on all 4 limbs, the hard keratinized joints growing from his 2 ribs also assist in crawling, which is between humans and giant spiders and looks quite eerie. When someone wanted to come forward and surround, the person seemed to hear the call and quickly fled. Danzhi couldn't help but think of the alien arm he saw on the shore. But there was not so much time to study the variation listeners at that time. The whole city was under martial law, capturing all animals, and carrying out double-intensity disinfection and sterilization in areas covered with vegetation to prevent insect variation. I remember living in the workplace during that time. During the day, I put on protective clothing and went door to search and test. At night, I burned animal carcasses downstairs in the community. My problem with crying in the wind was that it would be smoked out. Everyone is forced to stay at home, and those of us who have been transferred to the front line will occasionally encounter mutated animals, constantly trembling with fear. Zhou Zhao seemed to go back to those painful days. Of course, there were also a large number of non-mutated pets and normal citizens. In fact, they didn't do anything, but they could only be forced to watch their pets die. At that time, Hui's dog was torn off its leg by another team in our unit, snatched out and killed. When humanity is threatened, it does not hesitate to choose the ruthless path. However, this battle was ultimately won by human thermal weapons. The apocalyptic scene lasted for half a month, and the animals in Zhanlin city disappeared without a trace. Solved external troubles and began to deal with internal worries. Dozens of prisons in the city have risen from the ground, with a dedicated monitoring team established to deal with mutations. Relevant regulations have been quickly issued, targeting listeners in every detail. At the beginning, the group of troublemakers were arrested and some even cheered, but when those listeners who had shown their abilities were also arrested, the situation began to turn sour. When killing animals, the first to suffer is the police dog. Even if the obedient dogs mutate, they do not have the impulse to harm people. However, the rule is that even if they have made remarkable military achievements, they still have to die. A dog trainer who couldn't control his emotions attacked the senior management who went to comfort him with the police dog, making the situation even more uncontrollable. Subsequently, many pet lovers and members of animal protection associations formed an alliance and took to the streets to protest. Every group has extremists, and here, citizens can generally be divided into three factions. One type is ordinary people who usually don't like animals very much. They make a big fuss and promote the theory that listeners are generally harmful on the internet, believing that these mutated individuals will also change their thinking and must be strictly monitored. Another type of people feel that things have not reached an irreparable point, and in other words, it is irrelevant and they hold it high. The most uncomfortable thing is the listener's family and friends, who are both afraid of their family and do not want to lose them. There are always listeners with animals emerging from the corner to complain, and their temper is expressed by extremists. Even if they didn't want to do anything at first, they still made mistakes in the end. There is a young girl holding her beloved pet's body in front of the government office, unable to sit up for a long time. In the camera of the reporter, there is a child crying and demanding to return his mother. The relationship between people is rapidly deteriorating, with frequent conflicts. Later on, there was a law that required them to arrest all listeners and sentence them based on their behavior. Because I later asked a friend to obtain some medicine, after hiding from the previous few samples, they stopped investigating internal personnel. Prisons are everywhere, guilty and innocent people are locked together, animals used as food supplies are strictly kept in captivity, high walls are built along the coastline, and the monitoring team is vigilant in defending against even more terrifying monsters in the sea. Countless families are torn apart, people have lost their family and friends, dreams and the future are shattered together, and warm memories never reappear. Silence and suspicion enveloped the entire city, sliding into the abyss of extinction in silence. The private rooms in the CAFA were silent, and Danzhi and Dali had too few experiences. They didn't know how serious the consequences of social disorder were. For Xian, he was still in his infancy when the incident happened, and only now do they know the whole picture. Zhou Zhao said in a deep voice, "There's one thing you're right about. This city is about to die. The ecology is severely imbalanced, and everyone is psychologically traumatized. It seems peaceful and normal, but in fact, with just one trigger, this place will be irreparable. In this situation, it is unacceptable for either party to want the government to issue a peace act. Is there no other way? The solution is not without it. In recent years, scientists specializing in mutations have developed some ideas. Radiation mutations are reversible under interference, and some listeners who want to be ordinary people voluntarily receive experimental vaccines have slowly become ordinary people within 1 to 2 years. Danzhi guessed something and hesitated, asking, "It doesn't seem like it's popular now. Are there any restrictions?" The side effects have not been fully tested yet, and there are too many listeners. Additionally, due to the serious ecological imbalance and the imprisonment of listeners, normal people have also developed psychological problems. Many people have a serious tendency to self-destruct, and the focus of municipal work has deviated. However, in recent years, active proposals have been made, and with further efforts, there is hope. Dolly pondered, so the focus should be on regulating relationships, as well as promoting vaccines. With just this sentence, Danzhi concluded that the task of this little girl was the same as his own. Zhou Zhao was speechless as he poured half a glass of lemon water and said, "I've already told you everything I know. Now, let's talk about it. How do you want to save this city?" Danzhi already had a plan. If the contradiction is irreconcilable, everyone must become a community of interests, so that they can temporarily abandon prejudices. Knowing the past of this city, we must also know its future, and find ways to make everyone aware of this future.